He stood there stunned, Bluetooth speaker still in hand, as the young employee rolled his eyes and muttered, "Just read the box yourself, man." A few aisles over, two workers chuckled, not realizing their whispers carried. Guys like that don't buy anything big. What they didn't know was the man they dismissed owned the entire store. Hi, everyone. Today we're stepping into a story about power, humility, and the kind of silent courage that doesn't wear a name tag. Picture this: a CEO, dressed like any ordinary customer, walks into one of his own stores only to find himself ignored, dismissed, and quietly judged. Not because of what he did, but because of what he looked like. This isn't fiction. This isn't rare. This could happen to anyone, even you. So before we dive into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? Let's get into it. The parking lot was already half full when Darius Monroe pulled into a space near the front entrance. The late morning Georgia sun bounced off windshields and chrome rims, and for a moment the reflection made him squint. He checked his watch, 10:07 a.m., right on time. He reached for the bill of his navy blue baseball cap, adjusted it downward just enough to cast a shadow over his eyes, and caught a quick look at himself in the rearview mirror. Gone was the tailored navy suit, the crisp pocket square, the luxury watch. Today, Darius wore worn jeans, a heather gray hoodie, and sneakers that had seen a few too many miles. The man staring back at him didn't look like a man who managed nearly 300 stores across 18 states. He looked like any regular guy coming in to grab a phone charger, a shower curtain, maybe a few paper towels. That was the point. This location, store number 12 in his corporate registry, held meaning. It was the first one he'd opened outside of his home base in Charlotte, a leap of faith that had paid off big. He'd walked its aisles when it first opened, personally trained its first store manager, even stocked shelves that first hectic Black Friday. But that was nearly 9 years ago. Now the store was just one of many, and troubling rumors had begun to surface. Emails with subject lines like "customer complaint, lack of assistance," and "bias suspected" trickled up to corporate. It wasn't the volume that got to him, it was the patterns. So here he was. No assistance, no clipboard, no advance notice. Just Darius Monroe, unknown and unprotected. He slung a plain canvas tote over his shoulder and stepped into the sunlight. The automatic doors opened with a soft whoosh as he crossed the threshold into cool air conditioning and familiar smells: fresh rubber from the home goods aisle light, perfume from the beauty section, and popcorn from the mini cart by the toy aisle. The store layout hadn't changed much, and that comforted him. Darius started slow, letting himself blend into the morning traffic. A young dad tried wrangling twin toddlers into a cart shaped like a race car. An older woman with curlers still in her hair muttered to herself while scanning a discount bin. Near the registers, an employee in a red vest helped an elderly man find his loyalty card in his wallet. So far, nothing looked amiss, but Darius knew better than to judge the book by its opening pages. He drifted toward electronics. It was always a good section to test how staff treated customers, especially those who might not look tech-savvy or ready to drop cash. Darius approached a display with Bluetooth speakers, his eyes scanning the boxes casually. He picked one up, turned it over in his hands, and waited. About 8 feet away, leaning against the back counter with his thumbs lazily swiping across his phone screen, stood a young man in uniform. His name tag read Jason, early 20s maybe, tall, wiry, cool demeanor. But his body language said everything Darius needed to know: disengaged, bored, and oblivious. Darius waited, then waited some more. Finally, he took a small step closer and turned the box toward the light, pretending to read specs. Still nothing. He cleared his throat softly. That usually did the trick. Jason didn't even glance up. Darius stepped right to the counter and placed the box down with a gentle tap. That got Jason's attention, but not in the way it should have. Jason looked up, brows raised, expression flat. "Can I help you?" he asked, monotone. It was the kind of voice you use when you hope the answer is no. Darius smiled politely. "Yeah, I was wondering if you could tell me a bit about these speakers. Are they good for outdoor use?" Jason gave the box a dismissive glance, barely skimming the text before shrugging. "I don't know, probably," he mumbled. Darius tilted his head. "Could you maybe check? I want to be sure before I buy them." Jason sighed loudly. theatrically, as if the very idea of reading a label was a monumental burden. He grabbed the box, turned it over, and read aloud in a flat tone. Weatherproof. Works with most devices. Blah, blah, blah. Then shoved it back across the counter. It's all on the box, man. The way he said man wasn't friendly. It was dismissive. Darius kept his tone even. Got it. Just wanted to be sure. Are these compatible with all smartphones or just certain ones? Jason rolled his eyes this time. No subtlety, no shame. Look, you can read the box yourself. If you don't want that one, pick another. It's not a big deal to me. And just like that, Jason turned his attention back to his phone. Darius stood there stunned. Not angry, not yet, but shaken. He scanned the store slowly. At the makeup counter, a white woman in yoga pants was being offered product samples and a smile by a bubbly young associate. Near the front, a couple was getting recommendations for area rugs by a guy who looked like he'd won Employee of the Month 5 times in a row. It wasn't that Jason was busy. It wasn't that Darius had asked anything unreasonable. It was that Jason had looked at him, his skin, his clothes, his vibe, and decided not worth the effort. Darius didn't show it, not outwardly. He simply picked up the speaker box and walked away from the counter, slowly, deliberately, pretending to continue browsing. But inside, a cold knot had formed in his stomach. He had hoped he wouldn't find what he came looking for. But it looked like he already had. Darius didn't stop walking until he was deep into the bedding aisle, out of sight of Jason and the electronics counter. The speaker box weighed heavier in his hands now, though it wasn't the product itself that made it feel that way. It was the interaction, the implication, the quiet slap of invisibility that came with being brushed off like that. He placed the box gently on a shelf beside a row of throw blankets, then exhaled slowly. Maybe it was just one bad employee. Maybe Jason was having a rough morning. Darius wasn't looking to blow a single moment out of proportion. That's why he was here, undercover, anonymous, observing the full picture. One corner of one store wasn't the whole story. He reminded himself of that and pressed on. He made his way toward the seasonal section, passing by displays of patriotic paper plates and citronella candles stacked in pyramid formation. A couple of kids ran by, chasing each other with foam pool noodles, giggling. The everyday life of a store like this continued to swirl around him. He turned a corner into the home goods area and stopped. 2 employees stood near a shelf of cookware, both in their 20s, both leaning casually against the display like they had nowhere else to be. One wore his cap backward, the other had an earpiece but no card or stock to speak of. They didn't notice Darius at first, but then one of them, taller, lankier, with a patchy beard, glanced over. He didn't acknowledge Darius. Instead, he smirked slightly and leaned in toward his coworker. "That guy over there," he said under his breath, nodding subtly in Darius's direction. "Probably just here to browse. People like that don't buy anything big." Darius froze. His heart slowed. He picked up a pan and pretended to examine it, keeping his face turned just enough to stay unreadable. The second employee snorted. "Yeah, look at those shoes. Ain't nobody dropping real money walking in here like that. Probably just killing time." It hit harder than he expected, because they didn't know who he was. They didn't know they were whispering about the man who signed the checks, the man who fought for this store to be built, the man who used to sweep these floors at night when there wasn't enough money to hire extra staff. They just saw a black man in jeans and sneakers, and they judged him invisible. He stayed composed, no outbursts, no confrontations, just quiet observation. He placed the pan back neatly and walked away, letting the weight of the moment sit squarely in his chest. In the clothing section, things shifted. There, Darius found a woman neatly folding t-shirts on a center display. Her name tag read Rosa, and her energy was entirely different from what he just endured. "Hi there," she called cheerfully as he approached. "If you need a hand with anything, just let me know, okay?" Darius nodded. "Thanks, I appreciate that." She smiled, not the forced, retail kind, but the kind that suggested she meant it. A moment later, an older gentleman walked by, looking slightly overwhelmed by the assortment of button-downs. Rosa immediately stepped in. "Looking for something in particular, sir?" she asked, walking over. "I think so," the man said. "My son's taking me to brunch tomorrow, and my daughter said I can't wear anything with holes in it." Rosa laughed gently. "Well, then we'll have to find you something worthy of a brunch photo." Darius watched as she helped the man find his size, held a few shirts up for him to see, and even suggested a matching tie. The man left smiling, shirt in hand. That's what the store was supposed to feel like. And for a brief moment, Darius felt reassured. Not everyone here had forgotten the mission. As he made his way toward checkout, he passed by the front corner of the store. A woman stood behind register 3, her braids pulled neatly into a bun, her name tag clipped square on her uniform, Marcia. She rang up customers with care, each interaction warm and measured. She greeted an elderly woman by name, asked how her granddaughter's recital had gone, and took her time helping a young father use a digital coupon without a hint of impatience. When it was Darius's turn in line, she looked up and smiled. "Did you find everything okay today, sir?" Darius paused. "Not exactly," he said, voice steady but distant. "I think I'll hold off on these for now." He had picked up a pair of socks and a travel charger, props really to carry him through the store. Marcia's smile softened, and she nodded. "Totally fine. If you need anything else, I'm right here." That kindness had anchored him, because despite everything he knew, there were still people in this building who cared, who remembered what it meant to serve without judgment. But as he exited the automatic doors into the bright afternoon sun, the sting returned. Because the good moments didn't erase the bad, and what gnawed at him most was the thought of how many other people had walked into the store, black, brown, young, elderly, disabled, and left feeling small, feeling like they didn't belong. He reached his car, opened the door, and sat for a long moment staring at the logo etched on the storefront glass. It was his name on that brand, but today it felt like it belonged to someone else. Darius sat in the driver's seat for a while, not starting the engine, not reaching for his phone, just breathing. The air in the car was warm, thick with the scent of sun-soaked upholstery, and something else, something invisible, but suffocating disappointment. He stared through the windshield at the automatic doors he'd just passed through. People walked in and out with carts and kids and coupons. But inside, behind the smiles and summer sales, something was off. The problem wasn't loud. It wasn't even obvious. That was what made it dangerous. This wasn't just about Jason with the phone and electronics. It wasn't about the two whispering employees by the cookware display. It was about the invisible current, the subtle cues, the way certain customers, those who didn't look the part, were quietly filtered out of kindness, attention, and basic human decency. Darius ran his hand over his face and took a long breath. When he opened the glove compartment, his old notebook was right where he always kept it. He flipped to a clean page and scribbled, "Culture is invisible until it isn't." He paused, then wrote, "Store number 12. Disrespect in electronics, stereotyping in home goods, kindness in clothing, excellence at register." He closed the notebook, returned it to the compartment, and stepped back out of the car. This wasn't going to be a corporate email. This was going to be face-to-face. He walked with purpose back into the store, retracing the same path, only this time, not as a mystery shopper. This time, he was Darius Monroe, CEO, founder, and builder of the dream now being compromised. At the customer service counter, a young woman looked up with a polite smile. "Hi there. How can I help you today? I'd like to speak with the store manager, please," Darius said calmly. "Sure," she said, picking up a phone and pressing a button. "Manager to the front desk, please." Manager to the front. It didn't take long. Eric arrived within a minute. Late 40s, salt and pepper hair, pressed polo shirt. His name tag confirmed it, Eric Turner, store manager. He approached with a professional air, glancing briefly at Darius without recognition. "Good morning. I'm Eric. What can I help you with today?" Darius extended a hand. "My name is Darius Monroe." Eric froze. Recognition flickered first in the eyes, then in the way he adjusted his stance. He shook Darius's hand quickly, then straightened his shoulders, like he'd just been called into a meeting he hadn't prepared for. "Mr. Monroe. Wow. I didn't know you were visiting today." "You weren't supposed to," Darius replied evenly. "I came in as a regular customer, hoodie jeans, low profile. I wanted to see how things are going when no one's watching." Eric's throat bobbed. "Of course. I hope everything was satisfactory." Darius took a slow breath. "That depends on how you define satisfactory." Eric shifted uncomfortably. "Do you have a moment?" Darius asked. "I think this would be better said in front of your team." Eric nodded, already sensing the weight behind the words. "Yes, sir. I'll gather everyone in the break room." 10 minutes later, Darius stood at the front of a room filled with employees, some seated, some leaning against the back wall, others fidgeting or glancing at their phones. Jason was there too, visibly uneasy, his hands stuffed deep in his pockets. The two whisperers from Home Goods stood side by side, suddenly much quieter than they'd been earlier. Rosa and Marcia stood near the side wall, watching Darius closely. He waited until the room settled. Then he began. "Good afternoon," he said, voice steady but firm. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Darius Monroe. I'm the founder and CEO of this company. And today I came into this store not as a boss, but as a customer." The room shifted. A few heads tilted. A couple of eyes widened. "I wore this hoodie," he continued, gesturing to himself, "this cap. I asked questions. I watched how people interacted with me, and I listened to how people talked when they didn't think anyone important was listening." He let that settle before continuing. "I built this business from nothing," he said. "When I opened this store 9 years ago, I stocked shelves myself. I mopped these floors after hours. I talked with every single new hire, and I did all of that for one reason: to build something better. A store where everyone felt welcome, no matter what they looked like or how much money they had." He paused, scanning the room. "But that's not what I experienced today." The silence grew heavier. "In electronics, I asked for help and was dismissed. Not just ignored, dismissed. Like my presence was a burden. Later, I overheard two employees in Home Goods making assumptions about me, saying people like me just browse, saying I probably couldn't afford what I was looking at." Eyes dropped. Some employees shifted in their seats. "I didn't come here to embarrass anyone," Darius continued. "But I need to be honest with you and with myself. What I saw today wasn't just a customer service issue. It was a cultural issue, a values issue. And that means it's also a leadership issue, mine included." Eric nodded slightly from the back of the room. "This isn't about catching people slipping. It's about getting real about who we are and where we've drifted." Darius turned toward the crowd. "Some of you, like Rosa in clothing and Marcia at checkout, reminded me of everything this company should be. You showed kindness, warmth, and respect without knowing who I was. That matters. That means everything." He turned back to the group. "But others failed to meet the basic standard of human decency. Not just because I'm your CEO, but because I'm a person." He let that hang in the air. "Today we reset. We're going to start with mandatory bias and empathy training, store-wide, company-wide. No exceptions. Second, I'll be visiting stores more often, unannounced. Not to intimidate, but to understand. I want to stay connected to what's happening on the ground. And third, we're launching an anonymous feedback system for employees and customers alike. If something isn't right, whether it's a policy or a person, you'll have a way to speak up." Some employees nodded. A few looked genuinely moved. Darius softened his tone. "I know this may be uncomfortable, but discomfort is where growth begins. I believe in this store. I believe in every single one of you if you're willing to grow with me. Because we can't change what we won't confront." He paused once more, then said, "That's all." And with that, he stepped back, letting the silence breathe, letting the message settle. The work was far from over, but it had just begun. The meeting slowly dissolved into a low murmur as employees glanced at one another, some visibly shaken, others quietly introspective. Eric approached Darius, his expression a mix of humility and resolve. "I'm sorry, Mr. Monroe," he said quietly. "I had no idea this was happening right under my nose. I thought I had a good sense of the team." Darius nodded. "You're not the only one. When a culture slips, it doesn't announce itself with a crash. It just slowly changes the temperature. And by the time you realize it's too warm, you've already started sweating." Eric exhaled, almost in relief that Darius wasn't there just to assign blame. "What would you like me to do starting today?" "Let's start with listening," Darius said. "I want everyone here to know they can speak honestly. I'll send our corporate training rep down next week to start sessions. But for now, I want you to take the pulse of this store, get their feedback anonymously or face-to-face, and find out what's been festering." Eric nodded. "I'll do that. Personally." Darius looked around the break room. Rosa was still standing near the side wall, arms loosely crossed, her face calm but alert. Marcia had returned to her register, but had left a quiet impression that lingered. Darius could feel it. Some of the staff had already begun reevaluating the way they saw the store, and maybe themselves. As the employees filtered back out to the floor, Darius walked over to Jason, who still stood at the edge of the room, his shoulders drawn inward, clearly expecting the worst. Jason straightened clearly, unsure what to say. Darius offered a moment of stillness before speaking. You had a chance today to help a customer, to represent this store. You chose your phone over people. You dismissed someone you didn't know anything about. Jason opened his mouth, but Darius raised a hand gently. This isn't a public punishment, Darius said, but it is a turning point. For you. You've got a decision to make. You can keep showing up like this, or you can change. And I'll be watching. Not because I want to catch you failing, but because I believe people are capable of better when they are given the chance. Jason swallowed hard, eyes cast down. I understand, sir. Good, Darius said, then turned to leave the room. He stepped out into the main aisle of the store just as the overhead announcement chirped the start of a flash sale in garden supplies. Normalcy resumed all around him, customers laughing, kids running, carts clattering. But something beneath the surface had shifted, and it wasn't just the employees who had been affected. Darius made his way toward the registers this time without any disguise, his presence unhidden, his face uncovered. He could feel the glances, some surprised, some embarrassed, others grateful. As he neared register 3, he spotted Marcia again, finishing up with a customer. She looked up and gave a modest smile, then stepped to the side so she could speak with him quietly. You didn't have to say anything back there, she said softly, but I'm glad you did. A lot of us have felt it, the change, but it's hard to speak up when you don't know who's listening. Darius gave a small smile. I'm listening now, and I'm sorry I wasn't sooner. Marcia nodded. Better late than never, Mr. Monroe. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card, the kind he gave to employees who embodied the spirit of his company. Not a coupon, not a gift card, just a handwritten message of thanks and a direct number to his corporate office. You're one of the reasons this place still has a heartbeat, he told her. Don't let anyone silence that. She took the card with quiet gratitude. Outside the store, the sun had begun to dip just a little lower, casting longer shadows across the parking lot. Darius stood near his car, taking one final look at the building. It wasn't the glass, the automatic doors, or the bold signage that made a store special. It was what happened inside when no one thought the owner was watching. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant. Hey, he said. Yeah, I'm going to need a new itinerary. We're moving up the regional store visits. No more boardroom-only weeks for me. I want 3 unannounced visits a month minimum. She paused. Understood, sir. Should I notify the store managers in advance? No, Darius said. Let's keep it quiet. Just like today. He hung up and got in the car, but he didn't start the engine right away. The weight of the day was still in his chest, not as a burden, but as a reminder. This was what leadership looked like when the cameras were off. This was what integrity demanded. Not speeches, not slogans, presence, truth, action. He leaned back in the seat and stared at the store for another full minute. Then with quiet resolve, he turned the key and drove off toward the next location, the next conversation, the next chance to restore what mattered most. The next few weeks moved with the quiet intensity of a man on a mission. Darius kept his promise to himself, visiting stores unannounced, walking through aisles with the eyes of a customer, the ears of a leader, and the heart of someone who had once stocked shelves and swept up after hours. He didn't wear suits. He didn't bring his assistant. He didn't carry a clipboard. Just a canvas tote, a notepad, and a presence people didn't recognize until the moment that mattered. Word started to spread, not through press releases or corporate memos, but through whispers in break rooms, phone calls between store managers, and texts between employees who suddenly found themselves face to face with the man behind the logo. Some reacted with fear, others with pride, most with reflection. At store number 22 in Memphis, he saw an assistant manager pull aside a teenager who was new to the job and gently walk him through how to handle a difficult customer without losing his cool. At store number 8 in Tallahassee, he watched as a black mother asked for help finding a birthday gift for her son and was met with genuine enthusiasm from 2 young staff members who went above and beyond to make her feel welcome. But he also saw some of the same patterns he'd first witnessed back in Atlanta. lazy engagement assumptions based on appearances, and a quiet erosion of empathy. It wasn't an epidemic yet, but it was spreading slowly and visibly. And Darius knew the real work wasn't in correcting isolated behaviors. It was in rebuilding the foundation. So he launched a new internal initiative, one that came straight from his heart, not drafted by lawyers or PR teams. It was called Look Again. The message was simple: when you see someone, really see them. Look again. Don't assume, don't dismiss, don't ignore. Look again. Posters with the phrase began appearing in staff rooms. Training videos shifted from corporate monotone to human stories, real ones, including Darius's own. Anonymous submissions from employees, both positive and heartbreaking, were shared company-wide. Stories of how bias had impacted their experience. Stories of how one act of kindness had changed their day. Darius began weekly live calls with store managers. Not lectures, conversations. "What's going on in your store this week?" he would ask. "What are you proud of? What's bothering you? What's confusing your team?" For some, it was the first time in months, maybe years, that someone in leadership had asked. Eric from Atlanta kept in touch. Weekly reports turned into honest updates. Jason, the electronics associate, had requested to attend extra customer service workshops. Rosa had been nominated for Regional Employee of the Month. And Marcia, she'd been promoted to lead cashier and was training new hires in how to serve with presence. Still, Darius didn't pretend it was perfect. Culture, he reminded his team, wasn't a memo, it was a mirror. It reflected what people believed when no one was watching. And so he kept showing up. One Thursday evening, about 6 weeks after that first visit, Darius walked into a new store in Birmingham, Alabama. This one had just opened the year before. It was bright, clean, and filled with promise. He drifted through the aisles watching. In the tech section, a young black employee spotted him browsing and offered, "Need help, sir. These speakers are great for outdoor use. Waterproof and Bluetooth compatible with all major phones." Darius smiled. "Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to know." In housewares, a teenage girl helped an elderly woman find a jar opener. In cosmetics, a staff member complimented a customer's dress and pointed her toward a matching lip shade. No one recognized Darius, but they didn't need to. They treated him with care because they thought he was someone worth caring for. And that, he realized, was the point. Darius made one final lap through the store before heading toward the exit. Just before stepping out into the night, he paused by the customer service desk, where a display board featured photos of employees under the bold header, "Look Again. Every customer has a story." He smiled, not because the work was finished, but because it had begun. What happened to Darius Monroe wasn't a unique moment of injustice. It was a mirror, a reflection of something many people feel every day, but can't always name: to be overlooked, misjudged, dismissed. Not for what you did, but for what someone assumed you were. This story reminds us that leadership isn't about titles. It's about action, about showing up when it's uncomfortable, about listening when it would be easier to ignore. Darius didn't just confront a few bad attitudes. He faced a hard truth that success can quietly dilute the values it was built on if we're not careful. But he didn't walk away from that truth. He walked into it. And so can we. Whether you're a leader in a company, a parent at home, a teacher in a classroom, or a neighbor on your street, how you treat people matters. The tone in your voice, the patience in your presence, the willingness to look again. So the next time you see someone and start to assume their story, pause and ask yourself, have I really looked, or am I just seeing what I want to see? Because change doesn't start with a policy or a meeting, it starts with people and the courage to care. If this story moved, you share it, speak about it, and above all, live it. Thank you for watching.